Hello, welcome to our reading of the Bible. Hopefully you have invited some people to join us. Today we will be reading Genesis chapter 13. And if you have your journal or whatever you feel comfortable taking notes with, you will need to continue taking notes because now we're kind of getting into more conflict, more issues. And so let's begin. So Genesis chapter 13, verse 1. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. So remember last chapter, they were in Pharaoh's house because there was a famine. So they went down to Egypt. And Pharaoh found out that Sarai was Abram's wife, so he kicked them out with everything that they had. So now we are where Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. So Lot is still tagging along with his uncle, right? Verse 2. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. So, I have a question, okay? He went back to the place that he already was. So why did he go to Egypt? Verse 5. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse 6. Now the land was not able to support them that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. Okay, so that may answer the question. The land may have been able to support Abram, but not Abram and Lot, because they had herdsmen and herds and cattle and camel and all of this when they went to Egypt, and they came out still with the same stuff, right? So both Abram and Lot were blessed even in the famine, right? Even in Egypt, they gained even more because of the favor on Sarai, Abram's wife, right? So verse 7, that was my first time paying attention to that. He went back to the place that he already was before he went down to Egypt. So verse 5, no, not 5. Were we in 5? I'll read it again. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse 6. Now the land was not able to support them that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. Verse 7. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, right? The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So it wasn't necessarily Lot and Abram that didn't get along. It was their employees, right? But a good disagreement, I think we talked about this last in chapter 12, a good disagreement will align you back to obedience with God, right? Okay. So Lot wasn't supposed to be with Abram, and we're going to find out why. We're going to see how much of a handful Lot was. So verse 8. So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Verse 9. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. Verse 10. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Verse 11. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other, right? So it appears that Lot picked the land because it was fertile and well watered, right? But we should be careful of the places that we choose to be in, just because it might appear to have some temporal advantages, right? Verse 12. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. There's some red flags going up to anybody. So That land was not that good. It was not that fertile that you did not see all that wickedness in Sodom. But let's move on. Verse 13. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Y'all, sometimes this is us, right? We get somewhere, and it may not even be like a certain city or a certain state, but maybe just in the company of certain people to just gain something, and we're not paying attention of the company that we're keeping, right? Verse 13 said, but the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Verse 14, and the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, okay, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. Verse 15, for all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. Verse 16, and I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth. How many of y'all have counted the dust of the earth? No, I didn't think so. Right? I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants could be numbered. Verse 17, arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. Verse 18, then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. So once Lot left, okay, God revealed to Abram all the land that he would give him, right? So now here is another altar in Hebron, another land that is claimed for the Lord, right? Another place to worship and honor God. So Hebron is an important place as we go throughout Genesis. It was also a Levitical city. It was also one of the places that was a city of refuge, right? And so today it is a place of Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Same as Shechem. Remember, he built an altar there in Shechem where God told him originally of his promise. And today, again, there's conflict there as well. So we see when God says to go somewhere, he knows what we don't know. And I've actually heard someone say that God would not tell you to get away from your family. And this is a prime example. This is just, it's the opening to what's going to happen between Lot and Abraham, or Abram at this time. He's not Abraham yet, right? So God knows where you're supposed to be and what he created you to do. And sometimes your friends, sometimes your families, sometimes even your career will keep you in those same mindsets, same cycles, right? That same bondage that prevents you from getting to where God needs you to be so that he can fulfill his covenant, right? So we know that God told Abram, I'm going to show you the land. But his first instruction was get away from your kindred. And he said, I'm going to show you the land. He didn't tell him in advance where the land was, or he just told him, get away from your country, get away from your people, right? And so here, after Lot leaves, he tells him, hey, as far as you can look, north, south, east, and west, I'm giving all of this to you and your descendants. Now, mind you, he did not have a child yet. Sarai was barren, right? But he's promising him that all of his descendants will be as many as the dust of the earth. And so this is a great example of faith, right? His wife was barren, so how can he can't even see what God is promising him at this moment. And I'm sure when he left his family, he didn't see all of the land that God would give to him and his descendants. So it's getting good, you guys. Share with someone. If this is your first night, catch up with us. Go back and listen to chapters 1 through 12. Tomorrow morning, we will have chapter 14. If it is not live, the video still will post at 8 a.m., right? There still will be a video at 8 a.m. and at 7 p.m. every single day, whether it's live or whether it's just a video. So continue with us. The things that I point out to you, keep those in mind, because I feel like when you can connect the dots to the story versus just, taking a verse out of it and a sermon on a Sunday, when you can connect the family lines, when you can connect the places, it's easier to follow along and stay in context of what scripture is saying. So we've had, a lot of people that will take a verse out of a whole chapter and create a whole new doctrine, and it's completely out of context, right? And so each chapter that we have read, I don't know if you are, but I'm seeing the lesson in the chapter, right? Number one, obedience, obeying God. And then also trusting in God. And we see where we're going to see, of course, later on how Abram definitely puts his trust in God. But something that really stood out to me was that he went to Egypt because it was a famine and he didn't have any other choice but to go back. And so he was kicked out of Egypt by Pharaoh. He went back to the same place, and that place was still fruitful, right? So sometimes you may leave somewhere out of fear because you heard this is happening or this is going to happen. But if God has not told you to leave that place, don't leave that place, right? Because he went back and the land was still fruitful for them. They still had probably even more because the Pharaoh had given them more because of Sarai, right? And so you probably can see some situations in your life where this can apply to you as well. And then also with Lot, not really hearing direction from God until a certain person leaves or gets out of your life. But sometimes when someone leaves, and because the way they left was not easy for you, you try to reach back out and you don't even notice that, wait a minute, things are starting to change a little bit for the better, right? So we want to pay attention to what God is doing, not what our feelings say, okay? Pay attention to what God is doing, not what your feelings are saying. So go back over the chapter. If you saw something or you write down your questions, hopefully they will be answered throughout our reading I'm definitely trying to keep up with all of my questions because I tend to question a lot. But I like finding the answers, right, in the Word of God because I know God is faithful. And I think he likes to humor me, right? He knows I'm a researcher. And so ask the questions, And so we're going to see what happens with this story. I know most of you just heard the story about, Abram interceding for Lot, and you don't know the backstory. So the backstory is God told Abram to get away from that country, get away from his kindred, and he brought his nephew Lot with him, right? And now we see they started getting into it because they had so much stuff. So Lot moves very, very close to Sodom. So he's not in Sodom yet, but now we're going to start seeing why God told him to do that originally, right? So God bless you all. I will see you all at 8 a.m. for chapter 14. God bless.